Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we're back, and we're on Shir Dalid. We're on page 159, and up until now, we've been, a Shir usually dealt with a single malacham or a couple of Shirim on a single malacha, bishul, borer, dash, schitam, lush, teichen. This Shir is entitled Hilchot Hachanas Eichel B'Shabbos. Really, the malachas that are going to be involved in preparing food for Shabbat. Tonight, hopefully, we can get through the salting. For some people, this is actually a very new to them, that salting can be an issue on Shabbat. Not a lot of people know that. If you learn Hilchot Shabbat, you know that. But if you don't learn Hilchot Shabbat, you would never think that there would be an issue with salting. But so today, we're going to learn. There's a malacha called me'abed, right? And also known as moleach, which is literally me'abed is tanning. Okay, what's tanning? Not sitting on the lounge chair and tanning to the sun. Okay, not sun tanning, but tanning is a process of making the hide, the skin of the animals usable. Okay, right? You make parchment out of skin of the animal. You use leather for clothing and stuff like that. Right, exactly. It's an animal. Animals, just like any flesh, will decay unless you preserve that flesh. So there was a process in the tanning. So I'm going to read outside the Tzurba for a moment. This is from Rabbi Ribiat. He brings down that leather was made in 3 steps. Really? It's too cold here? I was actually enjoying it, but so why don't we shut this one off and leave? There's behind the mechitza. There's a right. Yeah, he'll do it. Yehuda will do it. Yehuda will do it. Yehuda will do it. Okay. So me'aved. So he tanning. So Rabbi Riyad says there's 3 stages of tanning. The first stage in English is known as curing. If I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, like you have cured fish, cured meat. So what is that? That's when they take the hides, the skin of the animal, and they cover them with salt, or they soak them in a brine solution, right? It dehydrates the skin. That's how you get the preservation. The second stage is the tanning. That's when they add even more salt, and they put it in a tanning solution, which is much more excessive salt, all right, until the leather is completely cured, that it is non-perishable now, okay? And at this point, they go into the finishing step, and this is where they either add certain oils to make it hard, or they do other things to make it soft, hard leather, soft leather, okay? That's the finishing process. So how was it done? It was done by salting the skin and then immersing it into a salt solution, okay? A very, very dense salt solution. And that's how you did tanning. Now, the halacha of Ma'abed, just to look at it from the perspective of leather. So there's a few halachot that you have to know about leather. He doesn't bring it here because here we're dealing with ochel, with food. But just to mention briefly, we just mentioned about leather. So, for example, polishing a shoe or oiling a shoe or some leather stuff, or even garments to make them soft or hard, is part of the malacha of me'abed, because you are like tanning them, you're fixing them, you're making them soft, you're making them harder. Now, what about putting a shoe tree into an insert into a shoe, which is a shoe tree?
The shoe tree.
You used to
They have a wooden thing goes inside the shoe
to keep the shape. So can you put it on Shabbat or not?
Why not? That's nothing.
So it depends.
Because the shape is there.
Very good.
Just
So if it's retaining the shape, you're just keeping it, that's fine. But if the shoe is messed up, right? Certain old shoes, you were in the wrong weather, it would come wrong. And now you take the shoe tree and you try to straighten it out on Shabbat.
up,
That will
it's-
be a problem of
if it's
Me'abed.
messed up, it's not going
That-
to fix it. It's not
Well,
gonna fix
let's
it.
say
Needs a lot more than this. No, it needs a lot more than
so.
this.
My uncle is a shoemaker. He used to have these. Used to have this machine like a stretcher.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a shoe tree, but basically, but it's like one that you can manipulate, not just by a
Yeah,
spring.
but you have to do
And
something
you
with
stretch
the
it.
leather also.
Yeah, you put some spray on it and stuff like
Exactly.
that.
So in Shabbat you don't.
So
put
he's
it,
saying over here, he says as follows. He says to retain the shape, using the shape tree is fine. But if you're trying to fix it because it's out of shape, then you're not allowed to put it in. So too, if you have a new shoe and you want to soften it, you can't take your hand and bend it and stuff like that. You can walk in it and let it get softened by walking in it, but you cannot manipulate it with your hand to try to soften that.
Why
Because
not?
that's like the malach of ma'abed of working the leather, of working the garment, working the material. Okay,
You are loosening it. So
you can't do that on Shabbat, you're making it softer.
There's more color.
Well, it might be an issue of Tavaya too, but it's also an issue of Ma'abed because you are now adding to the leather, you're fixing it.
Use conditioner or something. Your cotton.
Most of them have oils and stuff like that, which fix the leather, which improve it, improve the leather.
Hard wax.
is a wedding tonight or something?
No, it's the week between camp and school. So
It's the
it becomes a
wax.
vacation week. Right.
It's the wax, like the hard wax that's
Yeah, for sure.
Like taking a bar of soap and
Right, smoothing.
smoothing.
Okay. So that is regarding leather, and no one has a question about that. That's ma'abed. That is tanning. Now, the Gemara in Sechah Shabbat says, wait, in our Mishnah, when it brought down the 39 melachot, it brought down 2 melachot that seem to be the same. One who makes very salted, or one who makes tanning. Behind the moleach, behind ma'abed. This moleach is ma'abed. It's the same thing. Take away one of them, because Moleach and Ma'abed is really the same thing. It's putting page 159. It's putting a lot of salt to improve it. And instead put sirtut, which is drafting. Drafting means you take the hide, right, and you put lines on it, indicate where it should be cut and something like that. So that would be another malacha of sirtut. Okay, now the Gemara asks the question that throws a monkey wrench into this whole ma'abed, which is Amar Rav Huna, Hai man de malach bisra. Rav Huna said, someone who puts salt on meat, chayiv mishum me'abed. He's chayiv because of me'abed.
Yeah, but
He is tanning
the meat.
He's tanning the meat.
Only if the meat is high.
What do you mean?
It was not cooked.
Why not? Even if it's cooked.
Even if it's cooked, people don't put salt on cooked meat.
I don't know. I'm
What do you
reading the
mean don't
Gemara.
know? What do you mean you don't know?
The Gemara said,
This
Hai man de malach bisra chayiv mishum me'abed. Rava Amar. Rava says,
No, not.
גם אני אומר לו, אומר לי, הוא לא יודע.
I don't know. It says meat.
No, it's only raw. Only raw, you are really doing something to the meat. Because when it's cooked,
Nothing to do with the
and
blood.
bishul. What
It's nothing to
is
do
it?
with blood.
No.
Yes.
What about en bishul achar bishul?
So what? What is
You saying it's bishul, right?
I didn't say it's bishul. I said ma'abed. Me'abed.
מה זה מעבד?
I explained to you. We started off by explaining what ma'abed is.
No. מעבד is only when you are doing it not for eating, for making something else.
No.
No, pickling, for example.
We have pickling. I never said pickling yet. What is ma'abed?
Ma'abed is to.
So I explained it. So I'm going to go back because I guess that's the correct answer. It's a preservation.
Right.
Okay? You have the skin of the animal. You want to preserve it. So you
Right.
put it into a salt solution. You salt
Okay.
it. You put it into salt solution.
Okay.
And then you finish it off.
When it's
That's
cooked.
me'abed.
Yeah,
It's
when
called
it's cooked.
Right.
If it's
Okay.
cooked
Who
already.
cares if it's cooked or not? He's preserving the meat.
I care because I don't think so. The salt going to do anything to the meat when it's cooked.
Salt
already.
can preserve cooked meat. I don't know the mitzias of it.
So now the sailors in the boat, called malachim. Malachim, not
Nah,
malachim.
that's
The
The
salters.
salt, why salt? Because in the old days, they didn't have refrigeration.
Exactly.
So you have to take your meat. The sailors.
You had to salt your meat.
Months and months and have to salt the meat.
I don't know the mitzias if you cannot salt cooked meat. I don't think that's true, but I don't know. But Lamaisa is here. This guy salted meat. Okay. Hi man de malach bisra chayav mishum ma'abed. Says Rabbi Huna is chayav mishum ma'abed. Now, the next line is very important. Rabbi says, "Ein ibud bochlin." No such thing as preservation by food. Ma'abed is tanning. Is when you take the skin of the animal and you want to make it into a hide. You want to make it into leather. Okay, there's ma'abed. There's no ma'abed by food.
That's what
Okay. Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, "V'afilu Rav Huna, like Amar Ela de Kaboy le Orcha," where he's taking it for a trip. Right? He's going on a boat. He's a sailor. He's going far. He's not going to be home. So it's only if he goes and he puts salt on the meat to the extent that he salts it thoroughly to preserve it. But if he's just home, right? Lo mashmi inish michla eitz. He doesn't make it as hard as wood, meaning he's not putting salt to the extent of preserving it and making it hard and keep taking it with him. He's just making it to taste. Okay, so we have here this Gemara. We have this Gemara that has a question about meat that is salted on Shabbat. Is it ma'abed? Is it not? We have Rabbi Huna says, yes, it's ma'abed, you can't do it. And the Gemara says that's only it to the extent that he does it, that it comes hard, like wood, meaning he's really preserving it. And then you had Rava. Rava said there is no ibud, there is no ma'abed by ochli. Okay, so, and let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam is source number 3 on page 116. And he says, it's a person who skins a portion of an animal, hide large enough to make an amulet, right? Similarly, min ibudi. So the Rambam paskins, there is no ibud, there is no tanning process by food. Okay? Now, the Tarshis Rid, right? The Piskei Rid, Rabbeinu Yeshaya of Trani, he says, who's the halacha like? So it's another Rishon. He's arguing with the Rambam. He says, "V'chivin the Rav Ashi mifarish the Milta." Since Rav Ashi is coming and explaining what Rabbi Bar Huna said, that there is ibud by meat, must be the halachas like this. Shmami na the haki hilchasa. V'yesh ibud ba'oichlin imhu mitkaven l'shomno le'yamim rabim. If he's making it to go to preserve it for many days. I don't know. Again, I don't see anyone says. Again, the question is in Mitziyut. In Mitziyut, can you preserve cooked meat?
You don't need to preserve; it's already cooked.
What do you mean? If I have cooked meat and I leave it out in the refrigerator, it's not going to get spoiled?
If you put salt, it's gonna keep it for the same amount of time. Not any longer.
You know, if I salt it to an extent that I'm salting.
Salt it is gonna get spoiled the same amount of days.
Okay, you can argue this back and forth. At the end of the day, it's a.
They put
He's saying that they didn't cook it first. They did it right away to raw meat.
They put salt, then they would take off the salt right before they eat it. They wash off the salt and then they eat it.
Again, you're arguing with me. It doesn't make a difference. You have to go and experiment and tell me what's the truth. In the end of the day, any food that I'm coming to preserve, right? Whether it's cooked food, whether it's not cooked food, the fact that I'm preserving it is the issue. It's not that it's raw, that's the issue. The issue is that I'm coming to preserve the food, whatever the food is, whatever style of food is, according to the Piskei Rid, according to Rav Ashi, the way he sees Rav Ashi, according to Rav Huna, it's an isser of ma'abed, of tanning. The Rambam, and you have Rava that says no, right? There ain't ibud ba'oichlin. There is no salting, no tanning process by oichlin. Now Tosfot on source number 5, he says, don't get ahead of yourself. Even those who say that ein lahater mikan melichat oichlin. There is no heter from here to salt food. The isur midrabanan. There's still an isur derabanan, right? Isur derabanan melicha. The perik shmona shalatzim, the 12th perik of Masechah Shabbat. There is a isur derabanan of salting food. Okay, so even though Rava said there is no malacha of me'abed by food, right? There's still an issa derabanan of salting food
but you know what?
on Shabbat.
You have to add when his intent was to keep it for a long time.
Not true. We didn't see what issa derabanan is.
What?
We didn't see what issa derabanan is right now of salting. Up until this point, all we have seen is
over here. מתכוון לשומרו לימים רבים.
yes.
What is לימים
That's the
רבים?
issa deraita, according if you say ma'abed exists by food. It would be if you do it for a long period.
If you are
Let me break it down. Let me break it down. I may have explained it wrong. Let me break it down for you again. You have an issue called tanning, which is really preserving. Okay, so you can't do that to leather because that's the problem. That's exactly what it is. That's ma'abed. Question now is, does it apply to food? Rav Huna says it does apply to food. You can't preserve meat. Rav says no such thing. There's no ibud by meat. Rashi says, even Rav Huna said that there is preservation by meat. That's only if you preserve it to the extent that it's going to be for a long trip. Okay, you're taking it for a long time. Rambam, no ibud by food. Tosfos Rid, Piskei Rid says that there is ibud by food if you do it for an extent of a long time, which would be the issa d'oraita, according to those who say there's ibud by food. Then Tosfot comes and says, not so quick to be matzah to put food, to salt regular food. Even regular salt might be an issue, okay? And that's an issa d'rabbanan. What exactly is this issa d'rabbanan? So now we're going to go into the Perik Shmona Shratzim, where this issa d'rabbanan of salting comes in. So source number 6. Tana Rabbi Yehuda bar Chaviva. Ein molchen tzinon ubeitza b'Shabbat. You cannot salt, not a radish and not an egg.
What kind of
on
egg?
Shabbat?
What kind of egg?
Regular egg, cooked egg.
Cooked egg?
Yeah.
Maybe he's talking about not cooked egg.
No. First of all, we don't pass about the egg here. We're passing on the radish. Yes.
I know.
But the Gemara's answer is it's beitza, right? Of beitza b'Shabbos. When you salt raw eggs,
what?
You salt raw eggs.
Some people they eat raw eggs.
It's talking about what you're going to eat. Just like you're about to eat a radish, you're about to eat an egg. You can't salt an egg.
We say already.
You can't salt radishes, a raw vegetable, right? That usually gets salted. You can't salt that. Ubeitza mutar. But you're allowed to salt an egg. Or Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says originally, Miresh pugla. What's a pugla? It's a radish. Okay, another word for radish. So he said initially I would salt radishes, and I would say because when you salt it, you take away the sharpness. When you take away the sharpness, that's not a problem. You're ruining the radish, therefore it's okay. But then I heard that Ula came and said that in Eretz Yisrael they would salt a lot of radishes, and that was a normal thing, and therefore he stopped salting his radishes, but he would still dip his radish into salt on Shabbat.
What's kisle?
Many piles and piles. Okay, so here we have, and then on this Gemara, we have a few things that we see. Number one, we see that there are different foods that salt might be an issue for some foods and not for others. Sanon, yes, beitza, no. We also see that there's a difference between sprinkling salt on the food and whereas dipping the salt of the food into the salt. We've also seen that there's something about being with piles and piles of radishes. So maybe if I just had one, maybe it's not an issue. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi in source number 7. Rashi says, Ein molchen tzinon beitza. You cannot salt on Shabbat a radish or egg. And Rashi says, shalosh v'arba chatichot yachad. You cannot salt 3 or 4 pieces together. Okay, so Rashi makes this distinction. 3 or 4 is a problem. Seems to be that less is not. The salt, me'avdin, banaseh kashin. It makes the radish hard, the heavy, tikkun. And it is a tikkun to the radish. So there is me'abed, the ister of me'abed, the rabbanon on food, according to Rashi, if you have 3 or 4 of them and you're making the food hard.
What's the thing with 3 or 4?
Also, very good.
Why not 1? Well, what's the different one?
Very good, no.
I don't know. You tell me.
Exactly. So are you processing it? When I'm tanning something, I'm tanning a bunch of things right away. I'm doing a big amount. I don't tan one little piece. So putting in one little piece is showing that I'm just eating this one. That's why it's okay, right? One little piece is okay. But if I have 3 or 4, then it looks like I'm doing a tanning process. Now, remember, Rabbi Agadi said that in the olden days, this was a common thing to do, to put salt on your food in order to preserve it. Okay? So it was something you had to make a gezerah on so people shouldn't preserve things, right? You had to make sure not to get confused. Therefore, if it looks like 3 or 4, it looks like a way of preservation, that would be a problem. Now, the Rambam, who wrote before,
But it says 3 ו-4 חתיכות.
3, 4 cut pieces, yeah.
Cut pieces.
Yeah.
How big is can it be cut? 3 or 4 cut pieces. It's nothing. It's not. We're not talking about.
It still
3
looks
or
like
4
there's a bunch.
No.
There's a bunch. So basically, what Rashi is saying, for example, if I take a cucumber and I cut it into a bunch of pieces and I put it on a plate,
And this looks like
I can't
commercial.
salt them like that.
It's already.
So Rashi's saying.
Okay.
Okay. Now the Rambam who said before there is no ma'abed by food, right? So what does he do with this Gemara? How does he understand this Gemara about salting? Why is salting an issue? So Rabbi Pinchas said before something that I told him, don't jump the gun yet, right? Now it's going to come. The Rambam writes, you're allowed to put salt on an egg. We have to see what's chayotzeba, what's similar to radishes. We'll have to see that soon. Also, you can't put salt in them. Mipnei shenira. Why? What does it look like? What does it look like? Kovish kivashim. It's as if you are pickling food. B'Shabbat v'kovish also mipnei shehu kimivashel, because it's like pickling is like cooking. Something that's very salt has a status of a heat in certain halachot, right? And therefore, says the Rambam, this Gemara that says you can't salt radishes, it's because of the issue of pickling food. It's special. Therefore, therefore, you're allowed to dip it, because that's not the way you pickle things. You don't pickle via dipping. You pickle via spreading the salt and putting it into a solution. Okay, but you don't do it by dipping, and therefore dipping would be okay. So I want to take a look here at Rabbi Ribiat outside 1 second.
Why not to say from the beginning, don't pickle snow b'Shabbat, b'melach, and that's it. You're going like this, You're going like this.
No one's going anyway.
You cannot use melach, and then they say you could use melach. You could tovelot.
We are trying to understand the Rishonim. We have to go this way, that way, because we don't understand what they're saying, but they were very straight. Rashi's understanding of salting food is a problem of ma'abed, is what Rami said before, that in the time of the Talmud Shulchan Aruch, right, there was no such thing as a refrigerator. It was a simple fact of life that fruits, vegetables, meat, poultry, and fish would rapidly spoil if not promptly eaten or preserved in salt and similar preservatives. Therefore, when families had an animal slaughtered, the hides and much of the meat would be preserved for storage and later use. Same thing you did for fruits, vegetables, legumes, and other foods. Because tanning and food preservation are similar processes that were of everyday activities, Chazal put a gezerah and said you can't be doing these things because of confusion that can happen. And therefore, this gezerah still exists today. That's the way Rashi understands the whole sugya here. The way the Rambam understands, the issue is of salting food on Shabbat is because of cooking. A heavily salted food acquires the halachic status of a hot, solid substance. Similarly, food soaking in pickling solution also considered mevushal. So something that has a lot of salt on it and something that is in a salt solution is considered a form of bishul. And that is the problem, according to Rambam. So this is now the salting is a problem either according to Rashi Ma'abed or according to the Rambam of bishul. So let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch does a very interesting thing. He goes both ways in his language. He says bishul, but he uses Rashi's language. Look what he says. Right? You cannot assault pieces of radish. Dalid, or hey, biyacha, 4 or 5. He upped it from Rashi. Rashi said 3 and 4, but that was Rashi's thing. Rambam never brought down a single word about how many. Rambam never says the issue of bishul, right? But Shulchan Aruch says it's how many you're doing. V'hakovesh aser, but pickling is forbidden because it is like cooking. You can put each one in and dip it. Of a beitzim muter l'mochan, but eggs you can salt them. So possibly Rashi is having a difference between putting in a solution versus putting on Shulchan Aruch is putting a difference between putting it in a solution versus putting it in salt. And I'm reading it again now, and I'm seeing that. Right. Also, limloach chatichos tnon dalad biyacham pnei kekove. Oh, but you're right. It's kovish kavoshin. It looks like it's pickling. Kovish also okay, so he's saying the Rambam's issue, which was kovish, which is bishul, but he uses Rashi's lashon of dalad or hay. Perhaps what he's saying is similar to tanning, that you do a bunch of pieces, right? You don't pickle one piece. You pickle a whole jar, right? You pickle pickles, you pickle a jar. You don't pickle one piece. Therefore, putting it on one piece is not a problem. 4 or 5, that's the problem to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, commenting on the Shulchan Aruch, and he says, Rambam. This is the reason of the Rambam, of it being an issue of bishul. Rashi, not some time, he gave it time. Shadei HaMelech mitkashim tikun v'tamim me'abed. It is me'abed. So here you have machoket rishonim of what salting is, me'abed or bishul when it comes to salting food. Now the Taz, in source number 11, the Taz wants to make a diuk over here. He says as follows. You're telling me I can dip kol achat levado. Why can I only dip one at a time into the salt? He said dipping is okay. Salting it is a problem. Dipping it is okay. But why only one? Why can't I dip a whole bunch? Let me take 10 radishes and dip them all in one shot. So the Taz wants to say that there's 2 issues here. 2 conditions regarding the prohibition of salting that could be similar to ma'abed. One, it's metam so he's doing a what's it called for a long time. You're leaving it in for a long time. So even if you take one, you can only dip it and take it back out. But even leaving one inside for a long time, that's also a problem, right? Right. So you can't leave it in for a long time. You can dip it and take it out. That's okay. And certainly, even when dips each piece individually and leaves it for some time, this is prohibited. Secondly, salting several pieces together, even if one does not leave them in the salt. So there's 2 issues: the number of it and the time that it's in. And 2 of them says the Taz is a problem, and the Mishnah Berurah says that as well. Okay, now let's skip to source 13, 1 source down, and then we'll come back to 12. Just in my head, it works out better this way. So we had the Taz. He showed us those two things, leaving it in for a long time and a number of pieces. Now the Taz wants to know, what was this that the Rambam said, Tzinon v'chiyot radishes and those similar to this. So he says, Lav dafka tznon, it's not just radishes. Duhu hadin kol davar shetzarech melicha. Anything that needs salt, kegon, onions, and garlic, stuff that you would pickle. Okay, stuff that you would pickle, that would be the problem to put salt on. Okay, so let's take a look outside of the Tzurba for a moment, just to give us an idea of what would be the issues. What would not be an issue, what would be an issue. Oh, so very good. That's why the Gemara said eggs are okay. Why? Because you don't pickle eggs. You heard of pickle egg? Never heard of it. Okay.
You would think eggs with salt and egg.
Just give it a taste.
With taste.
Here we go. So let's read the two halachot here. The laws of Shabbat from Rabbi Nachson. He writes, one may not salt radishes or other vegetables that are normally pickled in a large quantity, right? However, one may salt one piece at a time and eat it immediately. Okay, that's not a problem because you're doing it one by one. You're not showing that it's a tanning process, not a salting process. It's not a pickling process.
Right before the meal.
It has to be right before the meal, but one at a time.
You're making a salad for everybody.
So we'll talk about salad. Salad's different. Salad, you're gonna be okay. Salad, you're gonna be okay for a different reason. Right now, I'm talking about I have one cucumber and I want to put salt on it. Okay.
What page, Rabbi Nachson?
You have page 444.
Thank you.
Page 444, halacha 7, until footnote number 3. Okay, for right now. One may not salt radishes, all the vegetables are normally pickled in a large quantity. Everyone may salt one piece at a time and eat it immediately. Remember, because Shulchan Aruch said 4 or 5 pieces, that's what you can salt. So one at a time, you definitely could salt. Same thing, by the way, is true when making sushi. They take raw fish and they put salt on the raw fish in order to make it hard. Okay, so you can't take a big piece of tuna, raw tuna, and put salt in it on Shabbat. Okay, you would have to take a little piece, make one little sushi, and then put salt on that one piece and eat it. Otherwise, it's going to look like you're pickling or ma'abe. Okay, in halacha number 8 over here, outside of the Tzurba, he writes, foods in which salt does not affect a real change, but merely adds flavor, are exempt from this Issa D'Rabbanan of salting in large quantities. The exemption is cooked meat, okay, which you don't usually salt, fish, this is cooked fish, and eggs, and similar foods that you salt normally for taste. You don't salt them for pickling.
So garden salad's okay.
So yes, let's take a look 1 second. Take a look if you have with me the footnote 8 on page 445 outside of the service. This is in the Rabbi Nachson's Sefer. He writes that salting whole tomatoes is not a problem. It's not a problem of pickling, since it's not common to salt red tomato. Green tomatoes, that's the one they pickle. So green tomatoes would be a problem with salt. So really, when it comes to the vegetables, it's the question, is the vegetable something that you pickle or something that you don't pickle? If it's a vegetable that you pickle, then you can only do one at a time. Can't do a lot of them. If it is a vegetable that's not pickled, normally not pickled, then you have no problem with putting a lot of salt, a lot of them in pieces, a lot of salting on them, a lot of pieces at one shot. That would not be a problem at that point. Okay? What? Normal salt.
For a while, or putting a little bit of salt.
You mean, what do you mean leaving for a while? What do you mean by that?
Putting it for 2 hours.
So we'll see that. It's coming up. It's a good question. We're going to see that. Okay. Now that we dealt with what's the issue, right? Radishes, vegetables that you usually pickle versus eggs and other foods that you just put for taste. Now let's go back to the source number 12 on page 163. He writes over here, the Chutshani. He writes, vegetables have been pickled in vinegar. Okay? And they've been pickled. I take them out on Shabbat. So I have a pickle jar, right? I have Uncle Vanya's pickles, very good pickles. Okay. So I took Uncle Vanya's pickles, I took them out, put them in a bowl, right? And I took them out of the juice, like completely out. And now the meal ends, and I want to put it back inside the juice. Is that a problem of pickling on Shabbat or not? So he says that ain kavush achar kavush. There's no pickling after pickling. No bishla achar bishla. There's no pickling after pickling. Okay, so therefore you're allowed to return the pickles back to the pickle juice. That's not a problem. Okay, interesting. What about the outside the Tzurba for a moment? I mean, now someone brings on page 444 on halacha 6. What happens if someone took a pickle from the pickle jar and realizes it's not entirely pickled, right? He would like for it to stay longer. Right? You make your own pickle, right? It's not sold in the store. You made your own pickle, and you took out the pickle and you tasted it. It's not pickled yet. I want to put it back in. Okay, could he put it back in on Shabbat? It's not completely pickled yet. Okay, so he says over here in Halacha, he may put it back if he's planning to eat it later that day. But if he's planning to eat it after Shabbat, then he cannot put it back. Okay, so it's halfway pickled. Okay, and you want if you leave it longer to get more pickled, you can technically put it back for Shabbat for use on Shabbat, but you can't use it for after Shabbat. Fine.
If we're not eating it during the meal, do we have to do only Tlat Yadayim for eating these pickles in brine, in water, or whatever it is?
Because it's a liquid.
Yeah, liquid. Yeah. Do we have to if it's like regular pickles in those jars?
So you're saying it's the issue of eating a vegetable that's been wet.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's not actual water. It's already like brined and pickled. Different taste. So do we have to wash our hands without a bracha or no? If it's not during the meal, of course.
I would have to double check.
Okay,
I would have to double check. That's a good question. Caught me off guard. Okay. I'll have to double check that one. All right. Let's moving further now. We are on page 164. Now we're going to be dealing with salt water. Okay. Salt water. Can I make salt water on Shabbat? A lot of people don't even think it's a problem.
Brine is
Yes.
that different than
Can I make brine on Shabbat? Can I make salt water on Shabbat? That's the question. So says the Mishnah, En osin hilmi b'Shabbat. You don't make hilme on Shabbat. What's hilme? Hilme is brine. Okay. Aval osehu et mei amelach. He can make salt water. That's okay. Himli is salt water. Okay. But apparently you can't make himli, but you can make salt water.
is brine. What's salt?
It's the same thing. It's a saturated salt and water.
And why is it saying that me? But
Right. So we have to see that. We have to see that. But and pita, you can put your bread in it. But notes in latocha tash, you can put it into food. Or Rav Yossi v'alohu hilmi isn't salt water hilmi. Bein meruba bein muat. Whether it's big, whether it's a big amount or small amount, it's the same thing. It's still aser. V'elu mei melch. So which is this mei melch that they're talking about? That's mutter. That's noitin shemen lechatchila. The tochamayim or the tochamelch. That's if you throw in a third ingredient. No longer just salt and water. Now you've thrown in oil, which you don't use normally for the tanning process at this point, or you don't use this oil usually in the pickling process. Okay, so you're throwing in an ingredient that's not really part of the mix. And if you throw in that ingredient, then you haven't made real salt water. Okay, now, so what was the Tanakama thinking? Tanakama says, Hilme, no, me, melech, yes. So my comer, the Tanakama is saying. So Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Hakikamar, Ein Osin me melech merubin. You cannot make a lot of salt water. That's going to be the issue. Okay, Aval Osahu me melech muaten. But you can make a small amount of salt water. The reasoning probably would be is that making a small amount is not what you would use in the tanning process. Small amount is not going to use in the pickling process. You use a large amount. So a small amount wouldn't be considered part of the process. All right. So now, another halacha from the Gemara brings a brayta that says, even if you're making a small amount of mei melech, which you said is okay, because it's not the normal amount, you still cannot make it strong. What's considered strong salt water? Anything that makes an egg float, so saturated that it floats an egg. So now I'm going to check. Floats, it didn't float. How are you going to know? So v'chama, how much? Rabaya, trey tilte milcha and tilte maya. 2/3 salt, 1/3 water. That's the problem. Okay. Now, who would ever make such a thing? Why would you make such a thing? Lemorisa. All right, morisa was fish brine. In order to make the fish brine, you would need it to be that saturated. Okay. So 2/3 is salt, 1/3 water. That you cannot do even if you're making it in a small amount. So the Gemara says, according to the Tanakama, you can make a small amount of salt water, right, for one meal, for a small amount. That's okay. Big amount you can't make. Rabbi Yossi said you can't make small. You would have to make it with oil. And even according to the Tanakama, small amount, but you can't make it that saturated. It's 2/3 salt. That would also be a problem.
We dip the fish into offshore, into the salty water. But we still have, besides the salt, we have shamir, what is called deer, or we have
You're talking about
garlic.
like overseer?
Yeah, overseer.
Yeah.
So we still have, besides the melach, we
It's
have
no problem with dipping it in there. When did you make it?
on Shabbat.
You made it on Shabbat.
Yeah, it's salt water.
So you're throwing in other ingredients, you're saying. Right. So
We
that's
have
not
shum.
so then it's not salt water. If you're throwing in, it has to be oil or lemon juice or vinegar, something that you wouldn't usually use there. Right? If it's
we use, we use garlic.
right, but garlic you would use in salt water. Someone wrote over here the custom. Let me bring this up over here. Someone put in the chat. Let's see it. I'm accustomed to adding oil to salad before any salt or lemon to avoid pickling. Learn this with Ashkenazi. Person, is this necessary? Is this helpful? I don't usually mix a salad and oil before adding the salt. Putting the oil before salt make a difference. So we're going to see this, and it's actually very helpful to throw in oil before anything else, right? So you have the salad, you put the oil, and then you can throw in your salt. You won't come to any issue of pickling at all. Technically, you could put the oil after, but it's definitely better to put it before. We're going to see this in a moment as well. Okay, but that's a good point. So for you, Rabbi Pinchas, the overseer, the problem with putting in garlic you would put into a salt solution to pickle it, something that can get pickled. It has to be something more than that. It has something that you wouldn't usually put into a pickling solution, which would have to be oil, vinegar, lemon juice, something like that.
Besides the oil, vinegar, or
oil or vinegar or lemon juice. In either of those.
this is also part of pickling.
No, it's not.
Vinegar.
It's not. We say it's not. They say it's not. They say it's not. One may add wine or other juice to vinegar in order to tone the. I saw it. We'll see it in a minute. Let's take a look. Okay, one thing at a time. All right, now. Okay, so we're on source 16, and Rashi says the Rabbi Yossi is being strict, small and large, and it's like ma'abed, and therefore it's tikkun oichel, and you can't do it unless you put in something else. The Rambam, on the other hand, he again goes with his cooking process. You're making bishul, you're making pickling when you're putting in salt water. Therefore, you have to mix water, salt, and oil, right? Okay, so Shulchan Aruch. Let's take a look at Halach L'Maaseh Shulchan Aruch brings. Ein osin memelech harbe. You don't make a lot of salt water. B'yachad l'teit l'toch kivashim for pickling. Meshun damim le'ibud. You see, I love the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch puts the Rashi and the Rambam together. He says it's kibush, it's you're making pickling, and it's mavik. The damim le'ibud. Although yachol la'asot mimenu mi'at l'teit l'toch hatavshel. V'imnatan l'toch shnei shlishi melech. You put 2/3 salt. Also, mimenu afilu mi'at. So Shulchan Aruch brings down the halacha. Salt water. You only can make it if you make a little bit amount, and if you make it saturated, even that will be a problem if it is a small amount. Now, this oil that Rabbi Yossi said, did Rabbi Yossi say oil is good even if I'm making a large amount? Remember Rabbi Yossi said, Himli you can't make, Mei Melech you can. Which Mei Melech is when you put in oil. Is Mei Melech also small with oil? Or is it, even it could be large, and I put in oil, and that's not a problem? So that's the Mishnah Berurah here. And the Mishnah Berurah writes on source 19. We put the oil. Either he puts it into the salt or he puts the oil into the food or into the water. Right? There are those who are makel even if it's in a large amount. It has no name of salt when it put in the oil. And therefore he writes, the Hada Asr, Shemin Lipsoif. You put in oil at the end, that's a problem. The Mishun, the Bishashur, Natin Mayim Melech, Yachad Hunera Kima'abed. Because if you put in salt and water, right, you already have the salt water solution. And now you're going to come put in the oil? It's not the right way of doing it. You got to put in the oil one of the first. Either you have to put in by the second, and it has to be the oil already. Second ingredient has to be the oil already. Because otherwise, you already have salt water. And that's going to be a problem. So what happens when you have to make salt water on Shabbat? When do you have to make salt water on Shabbat? So you have Seder nights. And I have to make salt water. And I want to put in front of everybody a little bowl of salt water. Everybody gets their own ka'ara. Everyone gets their own plate and bowl. You know, everybody's making their own Seder. He's making his own Seder. Everybody's sitting with their own Seder. So they want to, and I forgot to make it Erev Yom Tov, Erev Shabbat. And now it's Shabbat Yom Tov, and I want to make salt water. What are you supposed to do? So says the Mishnah Berurah, source 20. Shabbat, Yaseh Melech Kodem Shabbat. Make it on Friday. Why are you waiting for Shabbat? Okay. If you didn't do it Kodem Shabbos, you cannot make a lot. You can make a small amount. So you'll make just for the Baal Bayit, the guy who's leading the actual Seder. Make for him a bowl, salt water, small one, and that's it. No, not a large amount. Okay. Right now, you're not making a bowl for everybody.
The salt shouldn't be a lot, or the water shouldn't be.
Both. It should be a small. It should be a small, and it should be less than 2/3 salt. Right. That's what we saw already. Okay. Very good. So that dealt with salt water. He talked to some people that they wouldn't even know that there's an issue of making salt water on Shabbat. So here's something that we can make people aware of. Now, the adding other stuff than oil. So first thing, the Taz says there are people, they cut the radish, dak. So obviously, not dak the Teichen issue, but they cut it short, small. Nice bikara, emolchin, and they put in salt. They're putting salt on snow. They're putting salt on a radish, right? And they mix it up, and then they put in the vinegar. They put in the oil. They put in the other thing. So how can you do that? Right? Mishnah Berurah said you got to put the oil or the other thing before you have to put it in the middle. You can't put it at the end. Otherwise, you already created the issue. You already created the ma'abed. You already created the bishul. So he says, near that time, the kivin the eimanichon oto klal, the el shovchen sham chometz, the gam minim achem loy dami leibul. He says, since you're going to do it right away, I guess people know that's the way it's done. You take the radish, mix it with salt, and then you put it right away, so it doesn't have time to do anything, and that's the way it's done, and it's fine. Tosot Shabbat also writes. He writes it clearly of a hacha kol yoidim shedarchu bikach l'shvok chachometz l'toicha to put in vinegar afterwards. Right. So even though you put in the order radish salt, which is already the issue, but since everybody knows you're going to definitely put it in, so it's not a problem. You can put it in later. The Chutshani over here in source 23. He says it's not a clear heter to do this. Look at that in the bold on the second line, last two words. Eina ela rak v'taras limud schus minagoylam. The Taz and the Tosafot Shabbat was trying to find a limud schus for what Klal Yisrael was doing, putting radishes and salt before they put in the vinegar. So therefore they said, everybody knows that's the derech, that's how it's done, so it's okay. But no, the chatchila, you shouldn't do that. and that's what the comment in the chat was to put the oil first, right? So this way, you never came to the stage of pickling, right? Because you had the oil there already. And here, the Piskei Tshuvot, this is what your question was in source 24. Shemin lav dafka. It's not only oil, but rather eladin chometz may lemon mishar mashkin. Okay, lemon water or other liquids, including other liquids, and including water. But this is only if one adds a small quantity of salt. This is common to add only in order to improve the taste, as then the moisture of the water or other liquid reduces the potency of the salt, such that they will not cause the vegetable to produce moisture. But if one adds a large quantity of salt, adding water, vinegar, or other liquids will not help. Meaning, yes, putting in something else. If you have the radish and you have the salt and you throw in water, which messes it up, okay. But your vinegar and it messes it up, that's okay. But if you're going to put a large amount of salt and a little bit of water, a little bit of some of the liquid, it's not doing anything. It's not doing it. So it could be other shar mashkin as well. Doesn't have to necessarily only be oil. But in salads, it makes sense to put in oil or lemon juice or something like that you would put in. I want to take a look outside the Tzurba for a moment in the Chayei Olamim over here in the laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nexon. We're on Halacha 7. In the next part, he writes over here. Yes, tempers of salt, right. That's why it's not anymore pickling, not anymore bishul, not anymore ma'abed. Right. So he writes over here, one may salt many radishes at once if immediately afterwards he pours lemon juice or vinegar on them, or oil, right, which can weaken the effect of the salt. Okay? So he said afterwards, right? That's what he wrote over here, afterwards. So he actually brings down the footnotes that not everybody agrees with the afterwards. He writes the Menuchat Ahava, the Shulchan Shlomos, or Shlomo Orbach, Menuchat Ahava, Moshe Levi, Chutshani, right, which we saw over here, that it's preferable to add the oil or vinegar before salting the food, right? But even that, if you didn't do that, you still have the Taz, you have the Tosefet Shabbat, you have a Shulchan Aruch Harav, you have the Ben Ish Chai, Mishnah Kaf HaChaim, or Litzion, that all say that if you put it in afterwards, it's also okay. It means afterwards, right after, not 20 minutes later, right after. Put in the radish, put in the salt, and then I can throw in some other liquid right after. So here we come. I have all the pieces of radishes. I could throw salt on them, no problemo. If right after I put in oil, vinegar, and stuff like that. So, but it's better to put the oil first. Okay, we mentioned it. Fine. Now, coming to making salad, salting salad. So actually, the Orchot Shabbat over here does a beautiful job in, if I may say so myself, in reviewing the hilchot of salting food. So he writes over here, right? Anything that's commonly pickled, right? Or if it is coming to preserve it, to mitaken it, you can't put salt in it. Or even cucumbers, you can't put salt on them because all of these are usually pickled items. Okay. The Isser Zed Nemer Apa Oven Shekvanaslo Echol Tayrakos Ha'elu Miyad. Right? Even if you're planning to eat them right away, you can't do it when it's a large amount. It gives the appearance it's either looking like pickling or it's looking like tanning. The nice and shemen or if you put oil or vinegar al gabe chatichas ha'elu mutter litain alein gamelech the boyfriend zeh ain't normally ibud klal. It's not ibud and it's not kibush. It's not considered pickling at this stage if you throw in the other thing. So this we already saw. This you already know. Very good review. Okay, now he says mutter take melech al gabe chaticha achat shel tzinon. Right on one piece of radish or milfafon v'chadaima. Im kavanasa v'oichel toich zman katzer. He's planning to eat it right away. But tam mishum shebelnichas hatichas achas ain't a near cloud kivoyli kvosh kivoshim or the oven. It's not looking like you're pickling because you pickle a jar, you pickle an amount, you tan a significant amount. You're not doing it to one piece. So one piece is okay. And even the Rashi uses a loss of 3 or 4. Shulchan Aruch usually lashon 4 or 5. Looks like the poskim saying 1 is okay, not less than 3, but 1 at a time seems to be what the poskim is saying is okay. But if his kavana is to leave it for a long time, so that the salt will cause it to emit juice, this is a problem. It looks like to be leaving it, right? As I said, leaving it inside is a problem. The Taz said you have to dip it and take it out, but leaving it inside is a problem because that's a mamish me'abed. Now, Yeraka she'ain derech l'koyf shem b'melech. Vegetables that you don't usually pickle. They're not pickleable. Not that they're not pickleable, but rather they're not. It's not something that people normally pickle. The animal poil behem ibud mutter lefzar lehemelch. You're allowed to put them. L'chein mutter lefzar melech agabe prusas agvina, right? Agvania, which is that? Tomatoes. Chatichos pilpel, so pepper. V'chadayim, pieces of pepper. Now, you don't really find pickled peppers. Like peppers, the bell peppers. Okay, jalapeno pepper would be an issue, but regular bell peppers, your yellow, red, and orange peppers, you don't usually see them being pickled. So therefore, no problem to add salt on them. Okay. Okay, when the near the mutter litain melch besalat yirakos asher asu ruboy mirakos ein derech lekashem v'melcham. If you're making a salad that usually has vegetables that you don't usually pickle, so therefore you're allowed to put salt in them. Mutter litain melch agabe beitza obasar meushalim v'chein agabe sharma achalim. And foods that you usually just put it to taste, you're allowed to put salt on.
Melech is shalom bayit.
Oh, very good. Ein lahachem melech merubim l'tzarech tibul.
Doesn't cook enough salt, so you have to salt it yourself. So big deal.
Ah.
It's shalom bayit.
Right. Yeah, for
Otherwise,
taste.
you will
For
say,
taste.
"Oh,
When we not prepare a large quantity of salt water, right? Salt water you saw we can do. Preparing small quantity, which is how to kashir hanitzrach with sudas achas for 1 suda, 1 small amount. That is okay. Again, it has to be less than 2/3 salt. Okay, so we saw really all of these halachot already. Now comes the Shmir Shabbat Kilchatam, and on page 20, on page 170, source 26. You're allowed to. It was favor of a melech mishaper tamam, but it just improves it, right? Going beitzim or tomatoes. Oh, they have to be used that day, right?
סמוך לסעודה."
The toiv, and it's better. So you have to definitely use it that day on Shabbat. You cannot salt for tomorrow. You cannot salt on Shabbat for Sunday. If you salt it, you have to eat on Shabbat. Better to salt it right before the soup. Now here comes the real clincher over here. He writes over here that ein ragil lekvosh rak agvaniot shlemot. Right? You only pickle whole tomatoes, right? If they're chopped up vegetables, most times when you're pickling, you're not pickling chopped up vegetables. Definitely not in the chopped fashion of a salad, right? You don't usually pickle pickles, cucumbers without their peel, right? So if you already peeled it, right, it's not going to be an issue of pickling. So if you think about our pickles, they do sell cut pickles, right? Sliced pickles. They do sell spear pickles. So just cutting it may not be enough that they're pieces, but in a salad, you never find a pickle salad. You never find a garden salad that says pickled garden salad. Okay, so a salad that has a mixture of vegetables that are chopped, really there is no problem of salting that. Okay, and that's the Rabbi Nachson in Chai Olamim on page 445 and in footnote number 8. He writes, it's permitted to add salt to a salad consisting of chopped tomatoes, cucumbers, and others. Since in general, it's not common to pickle a chopped vegetable. But even so, he writes, it's better to put the lemon juice first or the oil. He said the same thing is true with avocado. You're allowed to salt avocado because no one pickles avocado. You ever found a pickled avocado yet? No. So therefore, there's no problem with pickling avocado. Okay. So you see that there's many ways to make a salad. It's not a problem. Now, Chacham Ovadia in Chazon Ovadia writes that you have a tomato salad. You're allowed to put You're allowed to put on it salt because right, not a problem. No concern that it's pickling, but you should do it. So do it right away for the suudah that you're about to eat. Right? Don't do it for later on. Then he writes, you're going to throw in oil, lemon juice, something else, because now you're coming out of any question. Is it tanning? Is it pickling? Once you throw in that other ingredient, the lemon juice, vinegar, oil, something like that, some other mashkin, then you're definitely out of the question of ibud or kibush, right? Okay. Now, so we dealt with all that. Now, now we come to salting eggs, which we already saw this. The Shulchan Aruch wrote, we saw this already. The salt, eggs, a lot of salt, it's not a problem. Again, because it's something just for taste, it's not something that you're preserving. Shulchan Aruch writes as well that basar mevusha oy beitzem mevusheles lehanicha. No. But even basar mevusha, you guys were attacking me before. Oh, cooked meat.
Look.
You cannot put salt on cooked meat or cooked eggs if you're planning to leave it for an extended.
And look what the Archot Shabbat said right before.
Yeah.
מותר ליטל מלח על גבי ביצה או בשר מבושלים,
Yeah.
וכן על גבי שאר מאכלים.
Yeah. You're allowed to.
over here מותר and over here אסור.
Why?
Why?
So here's lahanifa. You're leaving it for an extended period.
but בשבת,
So
בשבת, who's doing להניחה? בשבת
people are.
they do to eat
Here,
it.
this guy, for example, this guy wants to have salted meat for Motzei Shabbat. So when comes Shabbat, he takes his meat and salts it. It's cooked meat. He wants to salt it after Shabbat. Can't do that. Lahanicha, to leave it over for extended period, you cannot do. You're allowed to put it for taste for that suudah. At the latest, let's take a look. The Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah brings down as follows. Da'at Magen Abraham. V'taz da'afil da'ato le'echol beyomo im hu tzarech suda acheret yesh le'zayer bazeh. V'haynu k'suda acheret nimshach zman rav achar suda rishona. So says the Mishnah Berurah, Magen Abraham and the Taz, they say that you want to put salt, you're putting salt for that suudah, not for the next suudah. Okay, it's got to be for that suudah. But the Eliyarabba,
all this halachot is not for
mitzvah
today.
de'en lo also rak im bedato l'nich la'achar Shabbat. Chei masher bir hagra. Right, the gra and the Eliyarabba says if you're leaving for after Shabbat, that's the problem.
See, all
Okay.
this halachot is not for today because
Why not?
today we have refrigerators.
Why not?
On those days,
One
when
second.
they wrote all
I'll
this,
tell you, I
when
don't
they
agree.
wrote all this because they wanted to preserve it, and they finish eating their lunch, and now they want this not to spoil or something. They put salt a lot just to preserve it for another day or two. But we have refrigerators; we don't have to do this, and we're okay.
I agree with you, but let's say a guy still wants to put salt on it. So that's still a problem. It's still applicable. Guy wants to put salt on it, and he can't do that for after Shabbat. But if he wants to do it, because right now the food in the morning, I took it off lech, nice hot, and if I put salt in now, it's gonna taste good, but sudah shishi. So there you have what to be make on, because technically, as long as it's still eaten on Shabbat, it is okay. So let's take a look at this halacha in the Rabbi Nachshon in the Chai Olamim. Here he writes as follows: even when salting cooked meat or eggs, it is proper not to salt them with the intention of eating them later in the day. Okay, you should eat it for that sudah. However, by salting it, the taste will be improved, such with hot foods that will absorb the salt better now. It is submitted to be salted even if one will only eat them later in the day. but one may not do so on Shabbat with the intention of eating it after Shabbat. That you cannot do. So you could put salt on food to give it a taste, but only if you're going to eat it on Shabbat. To give it a taste and then keep it for after Shabbat, that's not looking good because that actually looks like ibud. That looks like you're keeping it for a long time.
Normally don't put anything in order to keep it after Shabbat.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
it
that
for-
normal. That's the normal process.
to
But it's
eat it.
important to know the halachot.
To eat it.
Okay, we're all on the same page over here. Okay, so this was on salting. We have what time is it? We have 10 minutes. Uh-huh.
Well, if you want to eat it, they say it's okay already. Long
So
time
it's
ago.
right. So what did we see? Let's go back to what we saw. We saw that tomatoes you can put salt on, right? Because it's not something that you usually pickle, right? We saw you can put salt on eggs. But Shulchan Aruch said lahanicha you can't do it. Leave it for extended period, you can't do it. Because the lahanicha itself looks like ibud. It looks like you're keeping it like tanning, you're trying to do something. So same thing would apply with kugel. What's different than kugel and an egg? It's the same thing, you're putting the salt for a flavor. So it seems like if you're just putting it the salt and you want to leave it for after Shabbat, that's going to be the problem. But if you're just putting it on Shabbat, if you want to eat it that way, not a problem. Okay, so that's the distinction. Well, let's review everything that we learned today. Let's go back to let's go to the end of the shir on page 194. Okay, the 194 it gives you a nice review. This is a nice solid way to put everything in your head. Okay, so salting food. The first thing we had that salting, there's an issue of me'abed, tanning, okay, which is used to preserve. Then there was a question whether that applies by food. The Rambam said it does not. Rashi says it does. The rest of my focus Tanoim, Rayam, fine. The Rid, Rishis Rid, he said that there is this is the right of salting meat for preservation. But then we said, what about radishes? The Gemara brought down radishes. So again, Rashi says it's ma'abed. And the Rambam says, no, it's pickling. So the issue is pickling. Okay? So we came out on Chokot Rishon and Rashi and Rambam putting salt is either an issue of pickling or it's ma'abed. The Taz wrote that leaving it in salt for a long time, even one piece is an issue, right? Which we saw as a problem. And a bunch of pieces that you sprinkle salt on is also a problem. What about if I took a pickle out of the jar and put it back in? That's not a problem. No kibbush after kibbush. Okay. Preparing salt water. So you had Tanakama, big amount can't, smaller can you could. Even small amount you can't do if it's 2/3 salt. Whereas Rabbi Yosi said you have to always put in oil. Okay. The Rambam wrote you should put in the oil. Mishnah Berurah wrote that you can even put a large amount putting oil. And on Seder night, you should make it small for just one meal. Okay? Just for the Baal Bait, not for everybody. Salting and adding vinegar. We saw that if you add oil or vinegar or some lemon juice, you're now taking away the salting process because you usually don't put that in there. Right? When do you have to put that in? And that was the idea over here that really you should put the oil as your second ingredient, right? Before you get to the other ingredient, because then you already created that mixture of salt water or salt with vegetable, and that would be a problem. Salting salads, we said,
No problem.
is
Because
usually not a problem because you're not pickling a salad.
It's not the way of pickling.
Okay. Chopped up stuff, they don't usually pickle it chopped. It's also not a problem. But Chamavaji wrote it's always good to throw in oil on Shabbat. All right, oil or lemon juice, something like that, because then you're going to go away from abed and pickling. Then we saw salting eggs is permitted. Salt an egg and leaving it for an extended period, right? Or any salting anything for a long extended time, that would be a problem. What about leaving it from one meal to the other? Better to eat it for that seudah, but you have what to be make on if you're going to put it now for later, especially if it's going to taste better that way. Then you have what to be mako on. Okay, and that is the review. Let's end here for today. Next week we go into the malacha of tzaveya, of coloring on Shabbat. What is the isser over there about the machek, spreading food, measuring food, making signs and shapes in food. That Hashem, next week we will cover all those topics.
What
Okay.
was Ma'abed in the Mishkan?
So Ma'abed in the Mishkan, very good. And he was required to prepare the hides of the elim, the rams, and of the tahash, the animal with the beautiful fur that were used for coverings of the Mishkan. He needed those hides to make the coverings. That's where the Ma'abed was done in the Mishkan. Okay, fine.
But why do you exchange the Ma'abed of Tahash and then all this leather for covering to tools, to
So that was the question. Do you or do you not?
ordinary
Do you or do you not? That was the question. That was Rabbi Huna and Rava.
Wow.
Yeah. Right, and then you have Rashi and the Rambam. Okay, let's close in here.